Which is, we've got involved and found out that it would be kind of fun to think about finding 150 women to represent the 150 years that have influenced us as a community. And we're not thinking of the big names that have had lots of publicity or that sort of thing, but people that just have really helped other people. Maybe it's, they always, as a little kid went home from school, some neighbor always made him feel welcome and gave him cookies as they went to their house, and she was doing that her whole life. Maybe it's, the first name that is forever brought up is Esther Williams. And you talk about, everybody relates to Esther Williams if you ever knew her. That is the first name, and I have no doubts what that is a legitimate one. Esther knew everything that went on in this town, and she made sure that all the rest of us learned it in the process. When my husband and I were going together, I guess we made a game out of not letting people know that we were going together. And when I walked in after 3 years and of going together and I was married, she said, "How did you keep it from me?" And I said, "I worked at it, Esther." The next words out of her mouth were, "Well, you'll never bake bread as well as his mother did." And I mean, I was a home economist, but I knew I'd never bake bread as well as Mrs. Harrison did. So Esther Williams had a real flair. And I always think of all the little boys that she learned how to do a job. I mean, I bet you showed up on time and you took that paper where you said you would and you did it on time, and you never let anything go wrong, because Esther would have been on your trail if you did. So that's certainly one of the names that, those were not necessarily parts of her job, but she was business manager, but she knew all those things. So there's another woman that I have just kind of thought about the last couple of days, and I think we have to think about whether we want to put this in. But one woman that certainly influenced the development of Vinton was a woman who gave her life for it. At one time, there was no bridge across the Cedar River. And if you wanted to come from the north side of the Cedar River to Vinton, you had to ride a ferry across, or a raft across the river. And before there was a bridge, one windy day, the man that ran this little ferry, he took a woman and her baby across the river, and the wind caught them, and the woman died, and the baby died, because they got caught by the wind going across the river. And the town fathers at that time got together, and in the stuff that we used for the river project, I have some of the names of those people. They formed a corporation and built the first bridge across the Cedar River. And there was a toll for going across the Cedar River, which was the same as what the ferry charged. I mean, you got so much per horse, or so much per cow, or so much per person, or so much for whatever. And you couldn't go faster than a horse across that river, even though they had built a bridge so that it could happen. Anyway, I don't know whether we want to call attention to that name. I think, in a way, she gave an awful lot to make Vinton happen, to get a bridge across the river. So we'll think about that, I guess. I'll dig out those names from that other project that I was probably here talking about at one time. But anyway, that's almost a frightening story when you think that somebody had to give up their life before we decided to put a bridge across the river. It's hard to think about not having a bridge. We've had, 5 now, I think? I think there are 5 bridges that have been built across the river. So my goal here today is really to just get you to think about people that your family talks about as making Vinton happen. And we don't have trouble coming up with people that are living and active now. We got good names coming in on that. But we have to think back to who your grandparents might have talked about, or who your parents talked about as, well, they made things happen in town, or they always did such nice things for people. They were always ready to help people. They did everything they could to make Vinton a better place to live. And it wasn't the newspaper headlines that they wanted. It was just because they were being a good citizen and a good neighbor and a good friend, and they did special things to help people. And I think we need to work on finding those names and trying to get just a little bit written up about him and a little publicity about him. And it would be worthy of our 150-year celebration. And, you know, I think some of you, it might be your mother, and it might be your grandmother, and it might be your great-grandmother that had some significant role. And of course, you know, the first two names that pop into mind besides Esther, one of them is Virginia Gay. I mean, she gave money that made our hospital happen. Now that, and we still operate under the organization of that very first hospital that came from her donation that she left. And another name from the hospital is Nettie Burke, and some of you may have heard that name and know that person. I don't remember, but she, 2 or 3 people have told me that she saved the hospital 2 or 3 times, and I don't know what that means. Somebody needs to ferret that out so that I know that we can put that story into. But she was kind of a head nurse and a head organizer. Julie, you probably got all that.
Yep, I can get that.
Yeah. So I'll give you the form. Because what this boils down to is, I've got long lists of names, but I need to have people fill out some information so that we have a nomination form. And when I talk about a nomination form, I do not envision that if you submit a name, somebody's going to sit around the table and say, well, this one gets on the list and this one doesn't. That's not the idea. And only if we get 1,500 names would we get into a selection, and I'm not worried about getting that many names. At this point, we have, a week ago, we had 30 names that had been submitted, and we just kind of started. So Melissa, we're working with the sesquicentennial, and Melissa Schwann put it on online, and our age difference shows. She's sure that all the applications will come online, and I'm just sure you have to have a piece of paper.
You're right.
I agree. Yeah, you gotta have a piece of paper. So, those of you that don't need a piece of paper, look online at vinton150.org, and there will be a form there you can fill out and submit to Melissa. The first night that she put it online, the next morning she had 9 nominations. She said she got tears in her eyes. She was so surprised. And they were from Missouri, Minnesota, Maryland. They were people that had grown up in Vinton, and they were submitting names. And I do not know the names that have been submitted. Melissa said, what are we going to do with the names? Are we going to talk about the names that have been submitted? I said, I'm better if I don't know the names because I'll blab something before I want it public. So we have not shared those names. Melissa's the only one that has that. So if there's 5 people nominate Esther Williams, that's just wonderful. And that's, when I'm talking about you helping, I do want the names, but at the same time, I'll either want you to look online or take a piece of paper and help us get a little information about them. It is not, we're not requiring a book to be written about them. 4 sentences tell a little bit about them and what it is that they did. Was it that somebody's mother had died and this lady helped every night get the little boy home from school and make him feel loved and still somebody cared about him. And that might be enough too. But anyway, we really want to think about people that helped in a little way to help others. If you wonder where the idea came from, what dreamed this one up? I went to visit Bob's niece in Illinois, and she took me to hear a historian speak about the Illinois 200th anniversary in Macomb. And what they'd done was work on a list of 200 people for that was the same kind of background to it, of people that were just kind of good, extra good citizens and friends and neighbors. Now there was a difference. They did both men and women, and before somebody gives me trouble.
That was kind of
I thought, why not do women? It was just when we were having all this flurry, you know, that we've had this year about women, and I just thought, well, you know, that's a good possibility. And what really made me decide that we might do women is I went through two books of history about Vinton. There was one woman's name. One woman's name.
She got shot.
Well, she wasn't in this
Oh,
one.
she wasn't
So
in
it was
there?
another one, yeah. But it's scary. And you know, there are lots, I mean, think of the women that even were early business owners in town, and they just weren't talked about. That woman, I'm positive the name was an old name of a doctor in town, and it was his sister that had a hat shop or something. So there was just very little mention of women, and so that's really the idea that made me think about focusing on women.